December 29th, 1999. It was almost time to start a new year and almost time to start a new millennium. For one girl in Oklahoma named Ashley Freeman, this day was her 16th birthday. Ashley's friend Laura Bible had asked her parents if she could spend the night at Ashley's house that night, since it was Ashley's birthday. The girls were lifelong friends and they did a lot of things together, so of course Laura's parents said yes. Laura left her house saying goodbye to her parents about 7:30 that night, but her parents had no idea it would be the last time that they would see their daughter. Ashley lived in Oklahoma with her parents in a mobile home. Her parents' names were Danny and Kathy Freeman. Ashley's boyfriend came over that night about 9:30 to give her a birthday gift. When he left the Freeman home, there were 4 people there, Ashley and Laura and Ashley's parents, Danny and Kathy, and everything seemed normal. But at 5:30 a.m. the next morning, emergency services responded to a call for a fire at the Freeman residence. After the fire was extinguished, the body of Kathy Freeman was found. Investigators didn't find any other bodies when they searched at this time, so there was no sign of the girls or Ashley's father, Danny. At the time, they had to consider the theory that Danny had possibly shot Kathy and had left with the girls. But the next day, Laura Bible's parents returned to the scene of the fire to search for themselves, and they actually found another body, a body that investigators had somehow missed. The body was Danny Freeman, and somehow, while the site was being searched, investigators had managed to walk all over Danny's body or all around him and not notice it. So at this point, investigators broke off the crime scene again and decided to search again. But after they searched again, they still didn't find any sign of the girls. Laura's wallet was found though, and in her wallet was her license and $200. Laura's car was also still there, parked but with the keys in the ignition. Now, I find this strange because I've never left my car parked with keys in the ignition, not even when I was 16 years old. It's possible that maybe that just was a habit of hers, but I always wondered, why would the keys be in the ignition of her car? The case took a new turn when it was determined that Danny and Kathy had actually been shot. They were both shot in the head with a shotgun, and this was the cause of death, not the fire. Kathy was actually found on a waterbed that had burst and helped put out the fire on her actual body, but she was burned on her back. An accelerant had been used, so it was obvious that this was arson. Police did not tell anyone what the type of accelerant was. It was a piece of evidence that they basically held back for investigative purposes, so that later, if they were investigating someone or got a confession or interrogating a suspect, it was just one of those pieces of information that they hold back to be able to confirm someone's story later if they were able to name the right type of accelerant. But I did find information released that the accelerant, whatever it was placed near a wood-burning stove. The Freeman property was not in a suburban area. It was a trailer on this piece of land that they owned that was about 40 acres. So it sounds to me like it was relatively isolated. This wasn't the type of neighborhood where you have close neighbors right nearby that would hear screams or, quickly hear that something is wrong. It's not a high traffic area where you have cars driving by constantly all day like you do in a suburban neighborhood that's highly populated. So it's not like there were cars driving by all the time to notice something going on somewhere very quickly. So what we do know is that 5:30 a.m. the fire was reported by then. But the actual time the fire was set could not be determined. The Freeman property was searched, but investigators didn't find anything. They didn't find any sign of the girls, so it was like they just vanished into thin air. Police had to consider whether the girls had anything to do with what happened, and if maybe they had just run away. There was a theory that possibly Danny and Kathy had gotten into an argument, and Danny had shot Kathy, and then maybe Ashley had shot her father trying to defend her mother, and the girls had just run. I don't think this is a very likely theory because Laura's car was still there, and her wallet was still there. There was $200 left behind in her wallet. And if you're a 16-year-old teenage girl and you're planning on trying to run away, you're going to take every bit of money that you can get. And you're also probably going to take your car, at least to some extent. If this is the middle of the night and you're trying to run away from somewhere, you're gonna use your car to get to, a bus or whatever other means of transportation you want to take, at the very least. Because this is the middle of the night, it's not like anyone's going to be immediately chasing after you, or they're not going to notice you're gone for a while. So, considering her car was left behind, and her license, which is her, her ID, and $200 that certainly would have come in handy for trying to run away, I never really thought this was a valid theory. Ashley had been saving up some money, apparently to buy a car, and she kept the money in the freezer, and by this time I think it was around $4,000 that she had saved up. Now that was gone. That money was gone. But still, if you were going to run away, yeah, you might take the $4,000, but you're also probably going to take another $200 that's in your wallet. Some people speculated that whoever had done this had to have known that the money was in the freezer because they knew where to find it and take it, but I don't think that makes any sense at all, because to me, anyone who comes into a home and, is threatening you with violence, threatening you with a gun, possibly shoots your parents right in front of you, and you are a 16-year-old girl scared out of your mind, it's not going to take very much to get you to tell somebody where that money is. I mean, a lot of people, when they're being robbed or mugged, they, without even being asked or prompted, they just offer, here, take what I have. Take my purse, take my money, take my car. So think about a 16-year-old girl being in this trailer and someone comes in and they have a gun and they shoot her parents. There's a good chance that she offered up that information hoping that maybe someone just wanted money and they would take the money and leave her alone. So I just don't think it would be very hard for these girls to have said, hey, here's this $4,000. I don't think it leads to any theory that it was someone who knew about the money beforehand at all. There were rumors that Danny Freeman was involved in drugs, mainly marijuana. There were rumors that he grew marijuana. Police were considering the theory of a drug deal having something to do with this. Investigators even got a tip that the girls had been seen at a known drug house on New Year's Eve, and that they'd been drugged, raped, and that the whole thing had been videoed. Police did search this house, and they found evidence of drug activity, specifically meth, but no evidence that the girls had ever been there, no sign of them. Danny had reportedly said before that if anything ever happened to him, to look into the sheriff's department, that they did it. The reason for this is because the Freemans had a son named Shane, who had been killed by a deputy about a year before this fire happened. It had happened on January 8, 1999. Shane Freeman had stolen a car and been pulled over, and the deputy that pulled him over said that Shane pulled a gun and that the deputy ultimately ended up having to shoot Shane in self-defense. The shooting was ruled justified, and the deputy wasn't charged with anything. But it was reported that the Freemans had threatened to sue the sheriff's department. The deadline for filing a lawsuit was coming up. It was January 8, 2000. So the deadline for they were going to file a lawsuit apparently was about a week or so. And allegedly the Freemans were trying to get money to hire a lawyer to file this lawsuit. This is another theory that was floating around that I find a little bit strange, because usually when you're filing that type of lawsuit, you don't have to pay an attorney a fee up front. You don't usually have to, give them a retainer or pay for the lawsuit. Usually if they're suing for damages, that kind of attorney usually just takes their fee out of whatever damages are awarded in the judgment when you win the lawsuit. I've seen it reported that they were trying to save up money to hire this lawyer, but I don't really understand why they would have been needing to do that if, usually in these kinds of lawsuits, you hire the lawyer, they file the suit. If they win, they take their fees out of that. However, I have not had any legal experience in the state of Oklahoma, so maybe it's different. Maybe there's something different about it there. I don't know. I just wanted to point that part out. The OSBI, Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, was brought into this investigation early on to avoid a conflict of interest because of what had happened between, the sheriff's department and the Freeman family, and they're not getting along. and the issue with their son having been shot by the deputy. So the OSBI came in and they did look into the possibility of the sheriff's department being involved. They did polygraphs. Ultimately, in their investigation, they ruled out the sheriff's department. They decided the sheriff's department didn't have anything to do with this. But people in town still kind of had that theory, and part of that was they were saying that because the Freemans needed money to file the lawsuit and they were running out of time because they only had about a week left, that maybe Danny had engaged in some sort of drug deal or drug activity to get fast money, and that maybe that, had gone wrong or it had something to do with, him being killed and this whole thing happening. But again, because I don't see why they would have had to come up with money quickly to hire the lawyer in the first place, I didn't think this theory held much water. A couple of people did confess to this crime, though. One of the people who confessed, his name was Tommy Sells, and he was on death row. He had been convicted of stabbing a 13-year-old and also slitting the throat of her friend who was sleeping over at the time. He was suspected of a lot more murders, up to 21. I've seen the number up to 21 in my research that investigators thought that Tommy Sells might have been responsible for. But he confessed to this murder. He claimed that he had killed the girls, and he did take the police to the alleged dump site, which was in Texas. He took them out there and said, this is where I put the bodies. They did a search out there, and absolutely nothing was found. And investigators ended up deciding that his confession just wasn't credible. But another person who confessed, his name was Jeremy Jones. He was a serial killer from Oklahoma, and he confessed to 13 murders. He was also on death row. He had been convicted of raping and killing a woman in Mobile, Alabama, and then setting her on fire to cover up the evidence. Jeremy Jones was also a meth addict, and he did confess to 13 murders, including the Freemans. 7 of the 13 murders that he confessed to were actually in Oklahoma. He said that he had shot Danny and Kathy and then taken the girls away at gunpoint and set the trailer on fire to cover up evidence. When he confessed, he mentioned the correct accelerant. Now, remember that the investigators had not released what type of accelerant was used. This was one of their pieces of information they were holding back to be able to confirm things just like this. And Jeremy Jones apparently named the right type of accelerant. He also knew the correct type of shotgun that was used to shoot Danny and Kathy. Adding to the credibility of Jeremy Jones as being a suspect, he was actually arrested the morning of the fire, which was December 30th, 1999 at 3:59 a.m., which the fire was likely burning at that time. But he was arrested for public intoxication and possession of drug paraphernalia less than 18 miles from the Freeman house. Jeremy Jones said that he had killed Laura first and then Ashley, and that he had disposed of their bodies in a mine shaft around the area of Galena, Kansas. Investigators did go and search the area that Jeremy sent them to. I don't think he was able to point out a specific mine shaft, but they went out there, they searched, and they didn't find the bodies. And after they didn't find the girls' bodies, Jeremy recanted his confession. So at some point, investigators decided his confession may not be credible either. This seems to be because they didn't find the bodies where he said that he had dumped them, and also they had some questions concerning the time frame. They thought he would have had to leave the Freeman's trailer by 3 a.m. to get to the site of where he says he disposed of the bodies, and then drive back to where he was arrested at 3:59 a.m. And they had some doubts that the fire was set that early. However, the only timeline that I've actually ever been able to find that's been given for the time the fire was set was between midnight and 3:30 a.m. Everything that I have found has said that a specific time of the fire being set could not be determined. They also cannot give an exact time of death for Danny and Kathy. I actually found an article written on January 13, 2005 from News OK saying that Jones was named as the prime suspect, and the article actually states that there was enough time between the approximate hour of death when the fire was set and when Jones was arrested that officials could not rule him out as a suspect. That same article also says it is unknown what time the fire started and that it is unknown what time Kathy Freeman died. And, quote, because the time of death is unknown, as shown by the death certificate, it is possible that Jones was not in jail at the time the woman was killed. I don't understand completely why they decided that he would have had to leave the trailer by 3 a.m. if the fire could have been started anytime between midnight and 3:30 a.m. The accelerant was reported to be placed near a wood-burning stove, which sounds like the fire could have been a slow-starting fire. The accelerant was just placed by the wood-burning stove. It sounds like something that could have taken a little bit of time to start. As far as not finding the bodies where he said, he could very likely just be lying about where he got rid of the bodies, because that part is the most incriminating evidence against him. It's harder to prosecute if there's not a body. If they find the bodies, it corroborates everything that he says, and they can charge him with this entire crime. That's 4 homicides plus an arson. It seems likely that if he was going to lie about any part of his confession, it's probably going to be the part about where the bodies are. And if he lied about where he put the bodies, then the timeline wouldn't have any problems anyway. Let's say that the fire was started at a time where he did have to be gone from the Freeman trailer by 3 a.m. There would be no problem with that if he's lying about where he put the bodies. If he didn't actually drive all the way out to this site in Galena, Kansas, and he disposed of the bodies somewhere closer by, and he's lying about this, then they can't come up with any timeline problems. It wouldn't matter. And it was nearly impossible for investigators to search all of the mine shafts looking for the bodies anyway. There is a 2,500 square mile area known as the Tri-State Mining District, and it covers areas in Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kansas. And the area that in Kansas that is part of this Tri-State Mining District is Galena. So where he sent them or claimed that he disposed of the bodies was part of this Tri-State area. But keep in mind, 2,500 square feet. That's huge. There are over 1,200 mine shafts in Pitcher, Oklahoma alone. So they really couldn't have searched every single mine shaft. It would have been impossible. And Jeremy Jones also, when he was arrested that morning at 3:59 a.m., was apparently high on drugs as well. So if you had been high and you'd gone and committed a crime while you were high and done something to bodies, dumped them in a mine shaft, in an area where there is 2,500 square miles full of mine shaft, and you're high when you did it, and you're not confessing to this until 5 years later, there's a very good possibility that you're not going to know the specific place or the specific mine shaft. And in his other crimes that he committed, if he abducted someone, when he disposed of the bodies, he didn't usually go to that much effort to actually hide the bodies. One of the girls that he confessed to killing, he had actually abducted her, and they found their body later, and they just found her kind of off the side of a highway. It wasn't a very hidden body. It wasn't disposed into a well or a pit or a mine shaft or buried or anything like that. He didn't go to that kind of trouble of trying to hide the body and cover it up. And a lot of times when a killer doesn't have a personal connection to the victims, they don't do that. And there wasn't a personal connection here. There wasn't anything that would, before he confessed, that would have led investigators to some sort of connection between these girls and Jeremy Jones. So why would he have to go all the way over to Galena, Kansas to dump their bodies in a mine shaft to make sure they were never found? It's not the MO that he used for disposing bodies in other cases where he took young girls. I want to give some information about the crimes he confessed to. As I said before, out of the 13, 7 of them were victims in Oklahoma. One of them was a couple in Delaware County, Oklahoma in 1996. That's 3 years before the Freemans. This couple was Doris Harris and Daniel Oakley, and they were 41 and 38 years old. They lived in a trailer in a rural area. They were shot, and then the trailer was set on fire. Now, does that sound familiar? To me, it sounds so similar to what happened to the Freemans, not just because they were shot and then the trailer was set on fire afterwards, but also their ages, because Danny and Kathy were 40 and 37, and this other couple that Jeremy Jones claims that he killed 3 years before the Freemans in their trailer, they were 41 and 38. I mean, that's 1 year difference. It's just a very similar crime. Now, he also confessed to in 1999, which is the same year as the Freeman crime happened, that he killed a 19-year-old named Justin Hutchings in Pitcher, Oklahoma. Pitcher, Oklahoma is not too far from the Freeman home. It's close enough that mine shafts in the area of Pitcher, Oklahoma have come up in the rumors and theories of where the girls might be disposed of. But he says that he killed this 19-year-old Justin Hutchings in this area not too far away on September of 1999. That's 3 months before Danny and Kathy were shot and Ashley and Laura disappeared. Jeremy Jones claimed that he used drugs and injected them into this 19-year-old to kill him and make it look like an overdose. After the Freemans were shot and the girls disappeared, Jeremy changed his name to John Paul Chapman and moved out of Oklahoma. That in itself is also suspicious to me. According to his confessions, he then killed a woman in Douglasville, Georgia on Halloween in 2002. Her name was Tina Mayberry. She was stabbed outside of a restaurant. She was 38 years old. Next was Catherine Collins in New Orleans on Valentine's Day 2004. She was 45 years old and she was stabbed and strangled. And in this case, there was a DNA match to Jeremy Jones. He also confessed to killing Amanda Greenwell and Patrice Andres. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Hopefully I am. Both in Georgia. Amanda Greenwell was 16. On March 12, 2004, she disappeared. Her body was found later and it had been dumped off a road, like I referenced before. She had been stabbed and her neck was broken. Amanda had been living in the same trailer park that Jeremy was living in at the time. Patrice disappeared from her beauty salon on April 15, 2005. Jeremy Jones said that he killed her and dumped her body off a bridge in Douglas County, Georgia. The authorities actually were able to find and recover her body. The earliest murder he confessed to was Jennifer Judd on May 11, 1992. She was 20 years old and it was in Baxter Springs, Kansas. I want to point out that Baxter Springs, Kansas is an area that has mine shafts. So if Jeremy Jones does have any sort of connection to mine shafts or ideas for disposing of bodies in mine shafts, there is that connection where a lot of these murders that he confessed to did happen in areas that had mine shafts. And he is suspected of committing more murders than he confessed to. Investigators suspect that there are others out there they don't know about yet, so it is possible that using mine shafts to dispose of bodies was something that he did, because he does seem to have committed crimes in areas where mine shafts were available. Jennifer Judd had been stabbed and it appeared that she had been attacked while she was trying to get into her car. The last murder that he confessed to was Lisa Nichols, a 45-year-old woman in Alabama. This happened during a Hurricane Ivan blackout on September 18, 2004. Lisa was found dead in her bathroom. She had been raped and shot in the head and then set on fire. She lived in the same neighborhood as a friend of Jeremy Jones that he was staying with at the time. This is the murder that he was convicted of and sentenced to death in 2005. The friend that Jeremy Jones had been staying with when this happened died, and then Jeremy Jones recanted his confession in this case. He claimed innocence and blamed the person that he had been staying with, who was now dead and couldn't respond to it. Jeremy Jones could be placed in the areas of each murder at the times that each murder happened. He has been diagnosed with ADD and schizoaffective disorder, and like I said before, investigators think that there are probably more crimes that he committed that they don't know about yet. So now we fast forward to 2018. Police arrest a suspect in this case. His name is Ronald Busick. He was 66 years old when they arrested him. The investigators alleged that Busick and 2 other men, Warren Philip Welch and David A. Pennington, are responsible for the deaths of Danny and Kathy and the kidnapping and murders of Laura and Ashley. Welch and Pennington are both deceased, so Ronald Busick is the only suspect left alive to be charged with this crime. According to affidavits filed by Gary Stansel, who is an investigator for the DA, and OSBI agent Tammy Ferrari, over a dozen people have given statements incriminating these 3 men. The men were known to be involved in drug activity and known for cooking meth. The theory of what happened is that these 3 men went to the Freemans to confront Danny about a drug deal. Some of the statements say it was to collect a debt over a drug deal. Others say that they were selling Danny some drugs and the girls walked in on it. They allegedly killed Danny and Kathy and then took the girls and started the fire to cover it all up. The girls are thought to have lived a week or less after they were taken and were possibly strangled. Ronald Busick denies involvement. He is charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder with malice aforethought, 4 counts accessory to first-degree murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, 1 count arson, and one count accessory to first-degree arson. He claims that he can't recall anything about the crimes that he is being charged with. How investigators got to these suspects is an interesting story. There were two private investigators who had been investigating the case around the time that it happened, and they had found an auto insurance card along a road near the Freeman trailer not long after the crime. This insurance card belonged to a woman who was a girlfriend of Phil Welch's. Witnesses have said that Welch would borrow her car often, and apparently the car also may have been seen near the Freeman home early in the morning of the fire. The two private investigators were Tom Pryor and Joe Dugan. Pryor had actually found the blue car that was linked to the insurance card in a salvage yard in Pitcher, Oklahoma. He contacted investigators, but he was told that the car had gone through too many hands to be processed for evidence. That's a little baffling to me because if there did seem to be a credible connection at the time between the crime at the Freeman trailer and this car, I would think investigators would at least try, that they would at least want to give it a shot and search it, but apparently they didn't. There are FBI documents dated January 3rd of 2000 that mention this insurance card. Pryor kept the card for 17 years, and in 2017, authorities contacted him and he gave them the card and the car registration and also rental receipt that apparently named Welch. The private investigators had stopped investigating the case because law enforcement had told them that they were interfering and that their private investigator licenses would be canceled. This is according to the affidavits filed. That's another thing that's a little baffling to me in this case, because if private investigators had actually brought law enforcement a lead that seemed like it could be credible or worth investigating, you would think law enforcement would take it and investigate it and say, thank you for bringing this to us. Not say, hey, stop what you're doing, stop investigating, you're getting in the way, we're going to take away your licenses. That seemed a little odd to me. Joe Dugan died in 2009, and his family attempted to give his files to the Craig County Sheriff at the time, but the sheriff declined to take them, so then the family destroyed them. Now back to 2017, investigators say that they obtained a box of files on the case from the new Craig County Sheriff, not the same one that declined to take private investigators' files, but the one that came after. In these files that they got from the new Craig County Sheriff, they say they found new information which was not in the OSBI files, and this new information led them to interview people who were named in the files about these three men, Welch, Pennington, and Busick. So the information about the insurance card and the car, combined with statements given by these people that they ended up interviewing, led to the arrest of Ronald Busick. The statements in the affidavits are given by former acquaintances or friends or even girlfriends of these three men. A woman who was a girlfriend of Welch says the girls were repeatedly raped and abused and that Polaroids were taken. She says that she saw Polaroids of Laura and Ashley lying on a bed tied up and also duct taped to chairs. One witness who claims to have seen these photographs describes the girls as looking emaciated. Another girlfriend of Welch says that she also saw the Polaroids and that some of them included Welch in the photos with the girls. She says that he kept them in a briefcase and that he used them as a threat to people who owed him drug debts. By using them as a threat, I assume that means that he would say, this will happen to you if you don't pay your drug debt or if you don't do what I want you to do. I did this and I'll do it to you too. This woman also says that Welch had the missing posters of the girls hanging on his wall. So the flyers that we all pass around on the internet or hand out or put up around town when someone goes missing, she says that he had those posters and that he had them on his walls. Just imagine that. That is strange under any set of circumstances. I don't see how that would be a normal thing for anyone to do. So that is definitely suspicious and also kind of horrible. There's a statement by a girlfriend of Welch, and I'm unclear on whether it's the same one or not, who says that he was a meth addict and that he did cook meth and that he assaulted her and also assaulted her son. He was arrested and she found these Polaroids while he was in jail. She says that she put them back in the briefcase and then put them back in his car, which was then taken away. Taken away are the words that was used, and I'm not clear what that means, because this is the reason why we don't have the Polaroids now. They're missing, law enforcement doesn't have them, and the reason given is because this woman says she put them in Welch's car, which was taken away. I don't know if that means it was repossessed for some reason, or if it was not his car, it was someone else's, or I don't know what taken away means, but I'm sure investigators are looking for the Polaroids. It would corroborate everything, all of the statements that these people are given, and pretty much prove that this is what happened in this case. It's just unfortunate that they don't have them now as evidence, unless they do have it and they're just not releasing that to the public. This woman also says that he threatened to murder her and gave her details of what he did to the girls as a threat. Basically saying, I did this to these girls, I can do this to you. Other girlfriends have said that they were threatened by these men into silence and told that they would be thrown into the pit with the girls. A girlfriend of Pennington says that he was abusive and used the same threats to her. Other acquaintances say the men bragged about committing this crime over the years, that the men have been heard calling the girls not very nice names, that they have said if they wouldn't have taken off running, they would still be alive. That statement doesn't make any sense to me. Why would they still be alive if they hadn't taken off running? That insinuates that they only decided to kill the girls because they tried to escape from them. I find that very unlikely in any situation where you've kidnapped two teenage girls and you've already murdered two people and they were witness to this. I don't see any scenario where they would have ever intended to let these girls go or let them live eventually. So to me, that statement doesn't make any sense, which makes me wonder about the credibility of whoever is giving that particular statement and saying that they heard the men say that, because it just doesn't make sense to me that for someone to say that. Friends of Ronald Busick say that he told them that they kept the girls somewhere on Welch's property, and apparently there are mine shafts that are pretty close to Welch's property. It's also been alleged that Busick told a reporter that he would only reveal the location of bodies to the girls' families. I'm not sure if that ever actually happened or not. It just was alleged in some of the research that I found. The theory presented is that Welch was the mastermind and probably the person who shot Danny and Kathy, and that Busick and Pennington were the ones who set the fire. That Welch used his girlfriend's car to go to the trailer and also to transport the girls away from the trailer, and that it was her, the girlfriend's insurance card, that fell out of the car during the process of this somehow and was found near the scene. It's thought that the girls were strangled and then put into a well pit or shaft, possibly later covered with concrete. Again, the statements of witnesses vary on that part a little bit. All three of the suspects do have a prior criminal history. Warren Philip Welch, who went by Phil, was previously charged with first-degree burglary, assault, battery, terroristic threats. He did serve time in prison. He's been described by people who knew him as evil. He was a Vietnam vet, and he was rumored to have some mental issues or possibly some PTSD. David Pennington served time for shooting a family member, and he was also charged with burglary in 1980. He was known to be a drug user. He was rumored to be a police informant, and people have described him as a drug kingpin. Ronald Busick, the suspect that is actually arrested and being charged now, he had prior drug-related convictions, and he has also previously served time. Where the case stands right now is that in December 2018, Ronald Busick went to court, and it was then determined that he would be evaluated by a medical expert to decide if he was competent to stand trial. His defense attorneys have brought up that his drug use over the years could have affected his mental state, but they have also specified that he suffered a brain injury in 1978 because he was shot in the head, and that also could be affecting his mental capacity. So it was decided he needed to be evaluated, and that trial is not actually going to happen until the evaluation has been completed. A status hearing was set for April 12, 2019. Which is very soon, and he was supposed to be evaluated by that court date, but we will see when the court date actually comes around whether or not that actually happened and if there's going to be more delays. Law enforcement has spoken of plans to search more mine shafts. I'm not sure if any of them are in the area that Jeremy Jones had sent them to, or they're mainly in the Pitcher, Oklahoma area. I actually have not been able to find if they've done any searches recently or found anything. They could just be withholding what's going on which they have every right to do and is probably a very smart thing to do. I'm hoping there's more evidence in this case that hasn't been disclosed yet, because it seems like a lot of hearsay. It seems to be based mainly on just witness statements. Just basically people say, I heard these guys say this. This is a case where they could ask for the death penalty. I don't know if they're going to or not, but I feel like there should be stronger evidence than this to ask for the death penalty in a case. Maybe there is. Like I said, maybe we just don't know about some of the evidence. So far, they're not releasing that they ever found the bodies. A defense lawyer would definitely have some things in this case to bring up reasonable doubt for. The circumstantial evidence against Jeremy Jones to me seems just as strong as the evidence they're presenting against these three new suspects. A good defense lawyer could have a field day using Jeremy Jones as reasonable doubt, considering that he confessed to the crime and that he committed such similar crimes, and also similar crimes in the close area in the same state as the one that this happened. I don't think that ruling him out based on the timeline or because they didn't find the bodies where he said he had dumped them is valid enough reason to prove that Jeremy Jones' confession was false, because of the things I brought up before about he's a murderer. Of course he's a liar. He, of course, could possibly be lying about just where he put the bodies, and that shoots the whole timeline problem right down. And he did name the correct accelerant and the correct type of shotgun. And again, they couldn't give a definite time of death or a definite time when the fire was set. And the window that they did give was pretty big, midnight to 3:30 a.m. And we do know that he was very close to the Freeman's house that morning at 3:59 a.m. There's just enough there to present him as an alternate suspect. There is a family member of Danny's that has expressed doubt about this whole drug theory and the theory that he was connected with these three men over a drug deal and that led to him being murdered, because Danny wasn't known to be involved in meth drug activity. And also, I believe this family member has said that he had spent some time around Danny not too long before this all happened, and he just didn't see any signs of that. If there is more evidence that hasn't been disclosed yet, then that's something that we'll find out as the trial proceeds along. And one of the reasons why I'm posting information about this case is because it has an upcoming court date and because trial should happen sometime in the relatively near future. So this is a case that, while you might already be familiar with it, it is now finally moving along, and you can follow it in real time and see what happens with this case as it happens. It's also going to be featured on an upcoming true crime series on CNN. This case has been featured on a lot of shows like Disappeared, Unsolved Mysteries, Vanished with Beth Holloway, so you may already be familiar with the case, and now you can see what happens with it. I'll probably post updates as the case does go to court. I'm very interactive with viewers. If people comment what they think, or if they have information to add, or they comment their theories on it. And as this case goes along and goes to trial, I'm hoping that people will comment and we can kind of all follow it together. I'll have links posted for some of the sources, and I'm going to post a link to the actual affidavits that were filed when they arrested Busick, and that basically outlines the case as the DA is presenting it. Law enforcement is also still asking for anyone who does have information in this case to come forward. There is, in particular, an anonymous caller who called in 2000 and said that the girls were killed and put in a mine shaft southwest of Pitcher, Oklahoma, and the investigators are hoping that whoever this caller was will go ahead and come forward again to give some more information as this case progresses into going to court. If you do have any information or tips, please contact the OSBI. There is actually still a $50,000 reward in this case as well. I'm hoping the family members do get some sort of resolution and closure in this case. This case was heartbreaking and tragic, and the families deserve some resolution. Laura Bible's parents have never stopped trying to find out what happened to their daughter, and it's my hope that in the ending to this case, they finally will. Please use the contact information on the screen if you do have any information. And if you'd like to follow this case along with us as it proceeds, click the subscribe button and join us.